My name is Rex Lawrence McCall.
McCall, M.
M, little c, big C, A, L, L.
And what is your birthday?
The 5th of February, when I was born,
Yeah.
1931.
1931. So your birthday just passed.
Yeah.
Ah,
I am 88,
88.
just past 88, or just past 87. Yeah.
You look great. You look great. Yeah. Tell me about your family background when you were growing up, your parents and your siblings.
That time I come from a big family. There were 9 children altogether. My father worked in Devonport, Tasmania. We also had my mother's father living with us for some time, so it was a big household.
Where were you born, actually? Your birthplace.
At La Trobe,
Could you spell it?
Latrobe, La Trobe, Tasmania.
And it's, yes, and your siblings?
I was more or less in the middle of the family. There's only 3 of us still alive. All the others are deceased.
And tell me about the school you went through.
I went to primary school at Sprayton in Tasmania. When I finished there, I attended Devonport High School, which is close by, but a bigger town. I left there as a young fellow, and I worked. There was plenty of work about then because it was during World War II. And I used to make some money on the way home from school, making boxes to put apples in.
Oh.
We used to have American Liberty ships, they were called, drop into Devonport Wharf, and we used to send a lot of fruit from Tasmania to England.
So the apple is one of the good...
Apples was one of those, yes. Yes, I became very good at very quickly making boxes. Also potatoes, a lot of potatoes went from the northwest coast of Tasmania.
So you were able to make money
I was able to make money.
on your bag
as a
from school to home?
Yeah, not a lot, but a little bit.
Yeah, that's good.
I did various jobs as a teenager, sometimes working in apple orchards. When I was very young, I went to Melbourne. I worked in Melbourne for a while, and then I was old enough to join the Victorian Police Force, which I did. I was a member of the Victoria Police Force when I saw a 2-year enlistment in the Army.
When was it?
It'll be about 51 or 52 probably. So I joined the Australian Army Pay Force for a 2-year enlistment. I was probably a young lad with a sense of adventure or something. And I was trained in Australia and then flown to Japan, and much further training in Japan at a place called Haramura up in the mountains. A hard day's march from Hiro. From there I completed that training in the British Commonwealth training area called a battle school, it was called. When I was there was a company of Canadians going through, a company of British, and an Australian company.
Wow.
And completion of that, I went with a group of reinforcements to Korea.
When was it?
Be 53.
What month was it? Can you remember? Was it summer?
I think it was round about the middle of the year. I think it was round about
Was it before
March. Round about there, I forget.
And where did you arrive? Where did you arrive in Korea?
At that time, I arrived in Korea, I think Busan, and from there, the details are very hazy now, but I ended up going to an Australian Army battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. And I became a member of a B Company, 6th Platoon B Company.
Mm-hmm.
I was a young fellow, and when you're young, you soon mix with your like-aged people. So, well received in the platoon.
What was your specialty?
I was a rifleman.
And tell me about the daily routine. What did you do there? Did you participate in the last battle of Hook?
Yeah.
Were you in the Hook?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Initially, I joined the battalion on a hill. I think it might have been 159 feature.
Hill 159?
Yeah. It would have been to the west of 355, which was a prominent hill.
Mm.
I was there for some time. There was the odd sporadic artillery and mortar fire from the Chinese. I went on some nighttime patrols forward of our perimeter. I was there probably 2 or 3 weeks, and then my battalion was sent to relieve a British battalion on the Hook.
On the Hook.
And that was a nighttime relief in place, the Army termination. In the darkness, we took over the defences on the Hook. My company was the forward company on the Hook, which was a long ridge about 1.5 kilometres in length. And then it had a steep spur running down, and the next high ground the Chinese people were on. B Company was the forward company.
So? What do you mean by forward company?
We were the most forward because of the shape of the land, the ridge. It was rather narrow.
Yeah.
And we were at the very northwest end,
Yep.
of the Hook.
And what was your routine? Tell me the detail. How did it working there?
Well, on the Hook it was 100% stand to all night. And we would, I was in a bunker with 2 other riflemen. We had a 30 caliber machine gun and our own personal rifles. We would go slightly down the hill to a larger bunker during the day, try and get some sleep, while they would maintain a skeleton group to man the perimeter. I got a terrific shock the first morning daylight when I saw where we were. It reminded me of a scene from World War I, trench warfare. Trenches and bunkers had been heavily bombarded for a long time. That position had been held by Canadian troops, by British troops, by American troops, and I should imagine by South Korean troops at some stage. there had been a lot of activity there, and it was shown by the condition of the trenches and the bunkers. They are badly damaged. When possible, early in the morning there was fog, and therefore visibility would be limited between us and the opponents. And then we would try and, with dead bodies and so on in front of the bunker. The one I was in with two other riflemen had timber in the back of it, and that had shown where a machine gun had been sprayed across the back in some previous attack. There was an arm sticking out of the ground just in front of it, holding a potato masher hand grenade. And there were a few bodies here and there. One obviously a Chinese officer, I'd say, from his dress.
Horrible.
Yeah. They were there before we arrived from a previous contact. During the very early morning, we could move around a little bit and attempt to just to put lime on the bodies out in front and so on. But it was very limited what you could do.
Because the Chinese watching
Chinese
you.
were very close.
How close was it?
Well,
100 feet?
I'd say 150 meters, maybe.
So you can actually see everything.
Yes, yes. And the spur we were on ran down to a lower ground, and then when it rose up the other side, the Chinese were on that feature. Mm-hmm. Whether that was part of the hook or not, I'm not sure, but it extended to more to the west, northwest, and they owned that, and we had the responsibility of the tip of the hook itself. We were there, and as I said, we used to try and sleep during the day, but everybody had to be awake all night. We received sporadic mortar and artillery fire. After about a fortnight, I think it was, B Company were relieved from their forward position by D Company, 2 Battalion. My company, upon being relieved, marched further south away from the front line. We just got there to our destination, and we were ordered to about turn and move back again because a big attack was underway. The Chinese hit the area with a lot of mortar and artillery fire. We copped some of it on the way back, walking back. We were mortared and so on. We ended up in a bunker slightly to the rear of where we had been before. In other words, we became a reserve company. Mm-hmm. The attack was very noisy. A lot of artillery from our side and from the other side. And this was sort of never ending. There were a lot of illumination flares fired. It was as bright as day. And this attack continued on I got an idea, maybe the 23rd?
July 23rd. July.
And it was for two nights it went. On the left of where we had been originally was one of our other companies, C Company, and on their left was American Marine Battalion on point 111. Chinese attacked, and then I think the attack must have been beaten off because they attacked again about midnight, and the point 111 was overrun at one stage, and the Marines got it back, I think, in the daylight attacked the next day. They occupied the position. It was low-lying piece of ground compared to where we were. We were up higher, which was to our advantage probably. We had a Vickers machine gun bunker right near the intersection of where the British Commonwealth Division and the American Marine Divisions met. And they were very helpful in firing across the front of our C Company and the area in front of the Marines.
Did you know Matthew Rennie at the time?
Matthew Rennie?
Yeah.
I have met him years ago, I think.
Here?
Yeah, yeah.
But you didn't know him there? He
No,
was there
I
also?
think he was in 3 battalions, I think. He may
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Yeah.
3rd Battalion.
Yeah.
You were in 2nd Battalion.
2nd Battalion.
So it was far from each other?
The first Australian battalion involved in the Korean War was 3 Battalion. They had been in British Commonwealth occupation forces in Japan.
Got it.
They went over. They had a very difficult role because they had insufficient clothing and so on for the Korean winter. So they suffered overall. They suffered most casualties.
Sorry for the interruption. You can just go ahead. The story that you used to tell me now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were there, and then what's happening?
On the hook.
Yeah.
Well, while we're sitting in this rear bunker, we got a message that they wanted assistance. Stretcher bearers required assistance in the forward company. Myself and I think it was 2 other soldiers left our position in the bunker and we went forward. We found 2 or 3 stretcher bearers with a patient on the stretcher. Because of the bends in the communication trench, they couldn't get the thing round the bend. So I leaped up on the top of the ground, a bit risky, but I thought, you know, we can't do anything else, and the others followed me with, we got the stretcher up, trying to be careful with it. We carried it across very exposed ground for a while until we could get back down in the trench. There was a lot of noise in the area generally. I don't think anyone actually fired at our little group. Whether it was because they could see we're carrying a stretcher, or whether they had more important targets, I'm not sure, but we were very fortunate. Let me see. The truce was signed, was it the 27th? 27, and everything came to a halt. We could look at the area in front of us, and there were a heck of a lot of Chinese dead there. In some places, they were too deep in some places due to the heavy artillery and defensive fire from our machine guns and so on. A terrible sight, and for the first time, we could stand up on top of our position and get a better view of what was going on. During daylight hours, particularly on the hook position, you could not do that. It would draw the crabs, as they say.
So during those last Battle of Hook, and usually you patrol at night, and it was frightening. Were you afraid?
I was a young fellow, and I don't think I was ever really afraid. I felt I was taking a big risk. But I was young enough to not greatly worried about being afraid. It was all a big, exciting adventure. And I knew it was could have disastrous results. I think I privately hoped that if I got hit, it was...
Were you not wounded?
No,
not at all?
Not there, no.
Wow, you were lucky.
I was lucky, you know. If I got hit, I was hoping that it'd be a clean one, you know, instead of losing half your belly or something like that. So I was lucky. I'm very thankful for that. We looked around, and there was even a dead American who must have been there a long time, lying just forward of the hook.
Mm-hmm.
We could see. I think it was some time since the Americans had been on the hook.
When did you leave Korea?
It'd be probably late in 1953. I went to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
My time was nearly up in K-Force, so I was sent to Japan, and I re-engaged in the Australian Army. That headquarter that re-engaged me was British Commonwealth Occupation Force, BCOB. I enlisted for 6 years, and eventually came back to Australia on a ship. Can't think of the name of it now. And I remained in the Australian Army for until 1974, I think, or 75, something like that.
Were there any Korean soldier or civilian that worked with you when you were there?
There was.
Tell me about them.
There was one per platoon, I think, and they were referred to as CATCOM, initially standing for Korean Augmentation British Commonwealth Forces.
Yes.
And we were down to one per platoon. I still remember the name of the one we had, Han Man Sun. I got a terrible memory, but for some reason I remember that name, Han Man Sun.
What did they do?
They did what our people did, but I think their primary role was to act, if required, as interpreters. But they did what our Australian fellows did. Same thing.
Did you make a good friends with him, or what happened?
Oh, Han Man Son, yes, he was a likeable sort of a bloke. He got on well with everybody. He had, I remember he went on leave once, and he came back, and the soldiers, we usually call them diggers. The diggers used to say, "How'd you go, Han?" He'd say, "Oh, number one wife, very good. Number two wife, bad-tempered or something." Oh, well, he fitted in quite well. He was a young bloke, and young people usually mix quite well.
Did you know anything about Korea? Did you learn anything about Korea before you left for Korea?
I knew a little bit. I knew the shape of it, projecting out from the continent that it joined onto. I would have known a little bit, but not a great deal. Not a great deal.
What was your first image? What was your first impression of Korea when you landed in Busan, 1953? Be honest, just be straight.
The first thing was that it was in a bad state, because it was obvious even to me that there had been a lot of movement of people. There were people living in shanties made from opened up beer cans and things, and because space was short, they were practically right up to the railway line, just enough room for the train to go through. And little shanties of cardboard and timber and beer cans and so on. And I could see that was a very grim situation. You felt very sorry for them living like that. And I forget where that was. I think that might have been Seoul, or...
Tell me about Seoul you saw.
Well, I saw very little of it when I was up there in the war. I had a revisit trip, and I saw more.
When?
Year I can't think of. I think it'd be about a good 15 or more years ago, I think.
15? So early 2000.
Something like that.
Yeah. And?
It impressed me then because it had grown. Seoul had grown. It even encompassed Kimpo Airport, I think, which had turned into a museum. There were still aircraft and tanks and things. And the city of Seoul had gone right round it, sort of thing. It was part of the city. Whereas years ago, I remember it was away from the city, outside the city. I was impressed with the buildings and the activity going on. I think some of the things I noticed in the odd shop were probably in front of ones I'd seen in Australia. You go past one of these ladies' shops, you know, with the latest models from France and what have you. But they were in the shopping areas and so on. And I thought, well, I don't see any of those back home, you know. But they're very impressive and very, very busy, everybody active. They treated us very well. We had a bus cart us about for a bit of sightseeing, and we went up to the DMZ. We were shown one of the invasion tunnels. We went down at a short distance, and there was like a steel gate. I forget whether there was actually a sentry on it, but they tell me at one stage there used to be a North Korean on one side, South Korean on the other side, eyeballing each other through the gate. I don't know. I didn't see that, but I heard it. I believe there were also, we're told, there were other tunnels also. They were good size. You could have driven an army jeep through, wide enough for that.
Yeah.
Or several people marching.
It's big enough.
Yeah, very impressive. A lot of work must have taken place to do that.
That's been made by the North Koreans so that they can penetrate and attack.
Yeah, they were called invasion tunnels from our guides. Yeah.
So, how do you link this dot? The Korea you knew in 1950s and the Korea you saw early 2000?
Well, Korea, I didn't see a great deal of it during the war because we were in the field all the time, or maybe just a little bit back. So I didn't see much of any cities pass through, probably Seoul, Busan. I think the ship, at one stage I went on leave, I think the ship landed at Busan on the way back. Rather primitive, rather like a peasant type huts, a lot of the isolated houses I saw with reed roofs sort of thing, and probably mud brick. And on the revisit trip, I went to a folk village, part of the tour, and I was impressed. We went into one of these old style houses, and the heating arrangement was a fire in the centre and little agricultural pipes headed across the floor as a means of heating, which was very good. We saw Korean national dances and things like that at this folk village. But I was impressed overall with the way it had developed into a very modern looking city, and no doubt the economy was going quite well. I also remember noting on the highway, in our bus at times, we'd go along the highway and come to what could have been an emergency airstrip that they could block off and detour the traffic. I also noticed cables across open areas like golf course or something like that, which was good. I was pleased to see that they had this little bit of defensive stuff already in operation, particularly airfields along the highways. The Germans had the same thing in World War II, I believe.
Have you been back to Korea since early 2000? That was first time and last time?
I only had the one trip.
One trip.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that Korea is still divided?
It's a terrible shame, terrible shame. A pity leaders in all countries could not be mature enough to sort out differences and sort out differences without resorting to warfare, which happens so often. We've always had it, probably always will, but I'd like to see a world where country leaders are more advanced in the mind and capable of handling a situation without warfare. Of course, it's a horrible waste of human life, terrible waste. But it was an interesting experience for me going to Korea. I was fortunate, and it helped me a little bit later on, having seen active service when I was in the army. And later on I went to places like Malaya and Vietnam and so on.
So you left Korea, at the end of 1953?
I think it was.
Yeah. And do you know whether Australian history textbook covers much about the Korean War and Korea?
I don't think it covers a great deal. I've seen the odd book, mainly written by ex-service people or other people who have, some reason or other, spent considerable time up there. But my answer is no, I haven't seen a great deal.
Why we don't teach about this? Because the country that you fought for was miserable. Now it's the 11th largest economy in the world and very democratic society.
That is true.
Very substantive democracy. Yeah. I think it's a kind of unprecedented phenomenon in the history of 20th century. And many people die there, 2 million civilian North Korean and South Koreans died of it, and 399 Australian soldiers being killed, and over 1,000 people being wounded and missing in action. It's a very kind of historical event that we need to talk about it and to teach to our young generation. Why we don't do that?
I don't know. For several years, it was not even called a war in Australia. It was regarded as a peace action. I'd say that was partly due to high-ranking political leaders, not only in Australia, but other parts of the world.
So President Truman called it police action.
Police action, yeah. Probably must have been political reasons. They don't use the word war.
Yeah, they didn't want a war after World War II, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think we have to do to change that reality?
What I mentioned previously, I hope that mankind is progressing, and I hope that the minds of our leaders in future will be capable of settling differences without killing each other. That's a terrible thing to do, but it's always been there. Way back it's been people getting speared and hacked with swords and stuff like that. And looking at it from human history point of view, you could probably say that there always will be war, but I hope we can grow out of that. We can be more intelligent and not go down that trail, that track. That's what I hope. But then again, we seem to hear about another war every few months, Middle East or somewhere.
Yeah.
Terrible.
What would you say to the Korean people in the context of having 70th anniversary of the Korean War breakout in 2020, next year?
I would say that I have met many young Koreans in Australia. They are very polite, and they know that I have been involved in Korea previously. They are so polite, it is impressive for young people. I like that. I am impressed by the way Korea, South Korea, has progressed with its economy and its, no doubt, raised standard of living and so on. And that is good to see. And in that light, I am pleased that I had a minute part in being a member of the military during that war. And I think South Korea will continue to go quite well because people are oriented in that direction. And it is the northern part, I don't know. I can't answer that. I just hope that one day they rejoin on peaceful terms. I don't think that would be impossible. Might be a few different levels of leadership before we get that far. However, that's the way the world is.
How did the Korean War service affect yourself?
Well, I used to have a few dreams. I probably had a touch of post-traumatic stress, but I never worried about that. I used to get the odd bad dream. I used to sometimes I'd be asleep and I'd dream of an advancing line of people running right over me and beyond, and they were sort of stylized figures. You know, you couldn't, not identifiable humans, but stylized figures. I had those for a while, but
In terms of a human being,
yeah,
how did it affect you?
as a human being, it made me a bit more mature and helped me see the world and probably myself slightly differently to before I went there as a young fellow. Part of that assessment, they might be age-related too. As we get older, we get more mature and hopefully more sensible. I was quite pleased with my service in the military during the Korean War.
Are you proud to be a Korean War veteran?
Yes, yes. When we come back, I remember there was not a great deal of people being pleased to see us or anything, except maybe old soldiers from World War II. And they'd make you welcome and so on. But the Australian civil population were not really interested in wars or anything like that, because they'd had it so easy so long, except those people who had gone overseas and been in the military. Australia, very isolated, you know, a big continent out here with very few people in it, and live a nice, easy sort of a life. I was born and grew up during the Great Depression, and big family. Our parents were good to us. We never went hungry or anything like that. But it must have been a very hard battle for them, no doubt about that. But I think that helps toughen you up a little bit for later on. I suspect a little bit now that some of our younger people are not used to having a hard time, and it'll hurt them greatly if it comes. On the other hand, young people that I served with in Vietnam, national servicemen, they were a good group, good cross-section of the community. They were good people. But you know, when I see young people sort of dressed with earrings and all that, rubbish and dyed hair and so on and so on and so on. I thought, now when is that person going to grow up, sort of thing, you know? Surely there's going to come a time when they think, I must look ridiculous, I'll get rid of these earrings and so on. But probably some of them never do.
Okay, yeah. Any other story or episode of battle that you want to share?
Korean, I got wounded in Vietnam on an operation called Hobart.
Mm-hmm.
I was the company sergeant major of B Company 6th Battalion, which was a new battalion raised specifically to go to Vietnam.
What, in Korean War?
Oh, in the Korean War?
Yeah, any other episode that you want to share? You think it's important for us to know?
No.
No.
Nothing outstanding,
Okay.
no. I was just a private soldier. Did what I was told.
Yeah, but because you fought and the UN forces fought for the Korean people so that we were able to rebuild our nation,
Yeah.
and that's where we are, and that's why we want to do this.
Good.
Preserve your memory, honor your service,
Yeah,
and educate our children about the history.
yeah.
So I want to thank you. Thank you. Great honor and pleasure to meet you, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.